Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here, the astrologer, formerly known as Mediocre. Nah, he's still okay. What's up, everyone? Hope you're doing well. And in this video, I want to go over retro ascendant lords and planets that are retrograde on the ascendant, right? So these are two critical aspects or qualities that will define a person and make them more retrograde. More they will embody the qualities of retrograde more. If the ascendant lord is retrograde, or if there's a retrograde planet on the ascendant, right? Um, and so what is a retrograde, right? What is a planet retrograde, and how do we understand this? How do we think about it? When we just look at it on the astrology zodiac, it looks like the planet's moving backwards. So that's one clue, is that the planet is uh, not going forward. There's a quality of not progressing, right? And so if it's on the ascendant, this can have a couple of different things. It can mean that the person is delayed in some way, right? And it maybe not necessarily in their career. Their career might take off, but they might be themselves held back in certain ways. Sometimes it's for better or for worse. In other words, it might keep the person younger or more youthful, a retrograde planet on the ascendant or ascendant lord retrograde, right? Because they are not growing in a certain they're in a certain way. They're keeping their youth, they're keeping their immaturity, right? And it can that can be both positive and negative. Like if you're trying to look young, if you are trying to maintain your youth, you're a musician or a stage performer, you always want to be young, that might be a benefit to you, right? But if you're trying to be very mature and wise and evolved or in some way that if it's badly aspected, it might actually inhibit your growth in your life, right? So it can go either way from that aspect. Um, there's the notion of past, that it's bringing up the past, right? Because when a planet's retrograde, we know that when a transit is retrograde, like past issues come up. So there's some idea of pointing to the past, of bringing up past issues, past karma. Then there's the association with esotericism or occultism, right? Because it's almost like the South Node, right? When we're talking about the past, we're bringing up almost like ghosts, spiritual qualities, past karma, past issues, past people, past experiences. So it's like there's a connection to the past, right? And if you want to take it into like the real esoteric woo-woo level, past lives as well, right? If you're born with a retrograde planet, it can point to something that happened in the past that you're carrying into the future, right? And I'm very careful when I talk about past lives because like I'm on both sides. I'm a Gemini, right? Like I understand past lives very I believe in them, right? And I have my own experiences, my own understanding, whatever. But I don't like when people are like, "Oh, this means this about your past life. That means that about your past life." We have to keep it very sort of broad. We don't know exactly what it means, but we can speculate that it's probably something to do with our past life. Let's just keep it at that, right? I don't want to make any concrete statement. This means this about your past life. That means that's wrong. That's not astrology. That's bullshittery, right? They don't know. They can't validate. Even when we can validate, things don't always add up to the way we think they should, and we have to keep an open mind, and we have to play the host, not play the guest, not the host. Meaning that we have to be always open to things being wrong, and if you can't validate it, then it's you got nothing, right? So that's a tangent. Um, but yeah, so it can bring up issues from the past life, or early on in life, right? They might show up very early because of their relationship to the past, right? Um, yeah. So, um, yeah, those two things, moving away from or going away from the status quo as well, the current trend of things. But let me share my screen so we can get a visual idea of what this means, guys. And before I forget, please hit that like button, guys, and subscribe if you haven't already. Book a reading with me, macro gold machine at yahoo.com is my email address, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. All right, so I got this queued up. Let me pull it from the beginning. This is how Mercury retrograde goes. We'll just do it full screen. All right, so now we're retrograde. See, let me just pause it here. So when Mercury was in front of the sun, it was retrograde. So what does that mean? Well, a couple things. First of all, now Mercury, when it's retrograde, is not being filtered by the sun. That's important. What's the sun? What does the sun mean in astrology, like in relation to what we're talking about? The sun is society. The sun is the whole everything. The sun is the trend of all of it. Why? Because we live in a solar system. The sun is our star. We revolve around the sun, right? And just to put it into perspective, people think like my sun is this and this is me. Well, guess what? The sun is like the least personal part of your chart. It has nothing to do with you, in fact, right? The sun was here before there was even like a single-celled amoeba on the planet Earth, before there was anything alive on this Earth, right? Well before, humanity came to be, and well before, you were born. Like you're basically irrelevant. The sun will be here long after there is life on Earth. The sun doesn't give a shit about you. It really doesn't. As an individual, it's got nothing to do with you. So like if you're taking your sun sign as something personal, you got it all wrong. You got it backwards. The sun and the sign it's in is nothing personal about it. There's zero. Like it's the same exact sun for everyone in the world, right? What's not the same? All the planets are the same. The moon might vary a little bit, but what's really you are the angles, right? That's individually you, because no two angles will be the same anywhere ever, right? That's you. You're the angles, but you are not the sun, right? So what is the sun? The sun is the world. The sun is the status quo. We look out in the world, we see like people, protesting, doing this. There's wars. There's all kinds of trends and stuff. That's the sun, right? Because that's where the sun is directing. That's the sun plus all the other planets. But the sun is like archetypally representing what the world stands for, where the world is. Now, if Mercury is in front of the sun, apparently going backwards, what's Mercury doing? He's defying the sun. He's defying the status quo. He's like, no, he's like in front of the sun. He's like, look, I'm not even, let's forget about the sun. Mercury, I'm speaking on behalf of Mercury. Mercury's like, let's forget about the sun. I'm talking to you directly, Earth and Mercury. When Mercury's retrograde, it's Earth and Mercury. The sun is in the background. Yes, there's like the apparent breakdown of communication and whatnot. Partially because Mercury's a lot closer to the Earth. It's a lot more intense, right? Same with Venus retrograde. Mars retrograde will be over here. All the other planets retrograde will be out here. It's the same idea. They're opposing the sun. When the outer planets oppose the sun, they're going to be on this side of the solar system, right? They're going to be opposite. So what we're getting is the pure, unfiltered energy of those planets when they're retrograde, right? Because they're not being filtered by the sun. Filtered by the sun means through the lens of society, right? When a planet is direct, it's going along with the sun. It's status quo. It's like, yes, I'm going to do all the things that society wants me to do. I'm going to go to school and get a degree, and I'm going to be a doctor, and I'm going to be a stand-up citizen, and great, like fantastic, right? Good for you. When planets are on the opposite side, they don't give a shit about the sun. They're like, I don't fucking care what society's doing. I'm gonna do what I'm doing, right? They can fuck off. Like, I don't give a shit if I'm the only one. I'm gonna do me, right? That's kind of the spirit of retrograde, because it's not being filtered by the sun. It's a pure energy, right? So that's really important to understand. So let's just watch this. You get the idea. Okay, direct. It's going along with society. Cool, cool, cool. We're just, yeah, everything's cool. Oh, now it's stationing, and now it's going retrograde, right? Nope, not agreeing with society, being belligerent. Okay, direct again. Going along with society. Yeah, everything's cool. And nope, not going along with society. I disagree. Okay, cool. I'm going back to normal, right? So that's basically it, right? It's the retrograde, besides the apparent backwards motion of the retrograde, which also is a thing. It's also the direct influence of the planet when any planet is retrograde. Okay, so I think that's pretty clear. Like we're getting a couple different associations. Let me stop sharing my screen for a second. With the retrograde, number one, we're getting backwards motion, looking to the past, right? Past karma, past influences, something perhaps occultic, spiritual, esoteric, right? Woo woo, yeah, like almost South Nodey influence, something from the past that happened before, right? And we're getting rebellious qualities, moving away from society, moving away from the status quo, being disagreeable, being different, not having to need the support of the masses, doing our own thing, being independent, right? Being a bit more belligerent, for better or worse, right? There are good expressions of this and bad expressions, right? If society is like, during the witch hunt, it would probably be good to have like some strong retrogrades so you could be like, that's not for me, buddy. I'm not burning witches, right? That's stupid, right? These are just women who you don't like, who whatever, they believe something different or whatever, right? Or the Nazis, like, yeah, I'm not gonna go and kill my fellow man just because you say they're whatever, Jews or whatever, gypsies, whatever. It's ridiculous, right? You need some retrogrades to not go along with that, right? But then retrogrades can also be like, criminals might have retrogrades, all kinds of ridiculous people doing ridiculous things, right? So it can go all sorts of ways. But let's look at some charts. I got a bunch of charts and we're going to get into it. I'm going to have to put the chapters up because it'll probably get lengthy. But first off, we have Angry Donna. It's not a bad name for her because she got her Ascendant Lord and Mercury right on her Ascendant retrograde, right? And if you've ever seen interviews of Madonna, I mean, you can pretty much tell just with her music videos and whatnot, she has a rebellious edge to her. She's not completely rebellious because Mercury's mundane. It's not like one of the outer planets. It's not like revolutionary, right? It's just sort of it's low consequence, right? It's not like a major thing. Like people with Mercury retrograde, they tend to be a bit more disagreeable. Like if you come up with them and you be like, this is this and that's that, they'll be like, no, you're wrong, right? They're gonna, because Mercury's the intellect, it's the expression, and they're gonna want to be a bit more edgy about that, disagreeable, not going with the flow, right? I mean, Madonna's like, I mean, she is, right? It also gives her that a little bit of rebellion in her music, trailblazing qualities, being independent and doing things her way and not going along with the whatever, right? But that's good, right? It sets her apart, gives her an edge, makes her more interesting, right? It's low stakes, but it's still pretty prominent with her. Yeah. And I'm not going to spend too much time on any one of these because I've got a lot to go through. As you know, typical Gemini style. All right, Hugh Hefner. This is like some Gemini's dating pool. I got a lot to go through, guys. It's just gonna be real quick with each one of you. Just kidding. All right. Hugh Hefner. Also Virgo rising. Mercury retrograde in the 7th in Jupiter's sign. So in Jupiter's bounds, Aries. Yeah, so Hugh Hefner, like pretty, I mean, self-explanatory. Revolutionary kind of guy in a way because he's doing something that was kind of taboo, not exactly kosher or in the eyes of the world, nudie magazine, right? And so it's not really socially acceptable. It's become more socially acceptable, but he was pushing the boundaries for a long time, right? He was pushing that envelope. Mercury's in Jupiter's bounds, which I think is interesting in Aries because of the nature of what he was doing, which was very excessive, right? Just like taking photographs of naked women and living it up in a big mansion, partying with naked, all those models, probably slept with a ton of them, right? So anyway, Mercury is also ruling his MC, also very relevant. 7th house, relationships. He's always photographed with the girls on it, each arm, stuff like that. All right. Some of these are more obvious, some are less obvious, but it's really good to see the range. And this is why I do this in this way, is also like to understand that, like, even if a astrological principle seems as solid as can be, there's still going to be variations and exceptions and charts that just don't seem to make sense, right? And that's really important to understand. Like, if you see like a lot of astrology videos where they'll like cherry pick a few prime examples, it's not good enough, right? You need to see all the ones where it works and where all the ones where it may be a little bit more subtle or hidden, right? Anyway, Nelly Furtado, Mercury in Sag on the ascendant. It's not her ascendant lord. Her ascendant lord is Jupiter, and Jupiter is also retrograde. So we got a double one here. Really important. And Nelly Furtado, not as edgy as Madonna, but definitely interesting, right? If you listen to her early songs, I'm like a bird, I'll only fly away. First of all, very Sagittarius, but second of all, very retrograde because of the message it's sending. It's not like, oh, please love me forever. We'll always be together and we'll just be one happy, loving couple forever and ever, right? Which is your typical, like shitty love song. She's like, I'm gonna leave you, right? Like, like harking back to Led Zeppelin, babe, I'm gonna leave you, kind of thing. I'm like a bird, I'll only fly away. Sagittarius, Mercury, retrograde, right? Jupiter, retrograde. And then like I think it's pretty apparent if you look at her lyrics, her other songs. I I don't know them offhand, but like her other song, like "Turn Off the Lights," I think had some a lot of retrograde qualities, and her general vibe. It's a bit more subtle, like than Madonna, because I think she's like a lot nicer person than Madonna. Um, but she definitely embodies a sort of retrograde quality to her music, and that made her stand out. That made her more interesting, right? She's not just, I mean, when she was not nearly as, I'm comparing her to Madonna, obviously, but she was not nearly as popular as Madonna when she was in her, heyday, but she was interesting, right? Um, and so anyway, yeah, I thought she was quite good because she stood out. All right, let's keep going. Now we got Nicki Sixx. Now these are all Mercury, by the way. I forgot to mention. Obviously Jupiter was her ascendant lord, so we could put it in that pot, but I'm putting Mercury. Mercury. Okay, so Nicki Sixx, Mercury on the ascendant. And if you don't know who Nicki Sixx is, he's an American bassist and the main songwriter for heavy metal, glam metal band Motley Crue, as well as Donna D'Ergo, ex-husband, whatever. He's also played bass for glam metal band, so he's a rocker, right? And he looks like a rocker. And he's had problems with drugs, probably alcohol. I mean, typical like Motley Crue. They were just like the typical party band, right? Um, Kind of gay if you ask me. Like wait, like heavy metal, like definitely ventured off into like gaylandia. And I don't even mean that in like a homophobic way. It's not even it's not even about homosexual. I just mean like with the glam, right? The just like ridiculousness, right? Is disgusting. It was gross. So anyway, that's neither here nor there, but that's a very Sagittarian kind of thing anyway. Um, yeah, Mercury retrograde on the ascendant. So yeah, definitely like um going against the grain, but not high stakes, right? Just sort of like being disagreeable, being, acting ultra gay, even if he's not gay, right? Just like with the hair and the makeup and the glow clothes, it was gross. Anyway, pretty obvious here that he's going to be rebellious with a small r, not just kind of almost on the surface, not really rebellious, but definitely not your status quo kind of pop music, right? Just sort of whatever. Lame glam rock, Motley Crue, they were just kind of dumb music for dumb people. It is what it is. What are you gonna do? Not that like, Madonna's music is any better. It's not. All right. Sophie Marceau. All right. Now here we got the retrograde Mercury. Um, it's conjunct her sun. It's in Scorpio. I just want to. I'm going to pull up her because um here we go. Sophie Marceau. All right, she might not appear that all that retrograde, but look at her. She's 57 here. Talking about youth, right? Talking about a youthful appearance. Mercury retrograde. She's gorgeous. 57. She's older than me. She's like almost 10 years older than me. Like that's amazing that she could look that good at 57. And so it um oops, I closed it off. I don't um so we'll just leave it at that. I mean, I'm sure we could find some things. Sorry. I'm sure we could find some things in her life that really represent this retrograde Mercury, but um, I closed out her Wikipedia page and I can't remember offhand. I only remember that she looks really, really young. Um, and that's probably part of it. But anyway, just because of time, I'm not going to spend too long on any of these, and we'll have to leave it at that. But fate kind of decided for me. I don't want to open up her page again. But let's move to we're gonna move to Venus. And we're gonna go with Layne Staley. Now I'm gonna use his Wikipedia. So he was the lead singer of Alice in Chains. And they were definitely retrograde sort of music, right? Because not pop, more underground kind of, even though they became very popular, they became mainstream. It's still like it's still embodying the retrograde quality because it's not where they came from. That's not their intent, right? It was more like trying to capture something counterculture, right? The whole idea of counterculture is really a retrograde kind of theme. But yeah, he was into drugs. He got into drugs. He was uh addicted to heroin, and then he died. Right. Um, and that's pretty much it. Like we could probably find a whole bunch of other retrograde associations with him, but yeah, Venus retrograde right on the ascendant in Venus's bounce in Virgo, so not in great dignity, right? Venus ruling the ninth house and the second house. So that actually makes second house for consumption, right? Second house is, a lot of things, but for looks as well, people with second and the first definitely really they identify with their looks and appearances, but also consumption. And then ninth house, um, celebrations, right? Partying, right? Traveling, celebrating, partying, that whole thing. Um, Obviously the retrograde is going to, especially when it's not in good dignity, it's not only going to give him a unique style, but it's going to make him very self-critical, right? Especially Venus, critical of his body. It's in the, pretty much conjunct the ascendant, 3 degrees and from the 12th. He's going to be very hard on himself. And yeah, the retrograde will be more challenging, difficult. I wonder, one of the other things you can look up, like when a planet goes direct. I haven't done that. So at 28, I think that's right when he died, isn't it? Wow, that's really interesting. Let me pull that up. Oh no, he died at 34. My bad. My bad. So his Venus had gone direct, which is interesting, but still, regardless, that'll be interesting to see like, okay, how far it went retrograde, then like through the secondary progressions, where did it end up when he died? maybe there was some correlation there. Maybe it was like met up right at the same degree or declination, something like that. Let's keep going. Terrence McKenna, Venus retrograde, right within 3 degrees of the ascendant in Scorpio. And if you don't know Terrence McKenna, you probably should. Look at this guy. He was heavily into drugs, right? There's an American ethnobotanist and mystic retrograde, who advocates the responsible use of naturally occurring psychedelic plants. He spoke and wrote about a variety of subjects, including psychedelic drugs, plant-based entheogens, shamanism, metaphysics, alchemy, language, philosophy, culture, technology, and ethnomycology, environmentalism, and theoretical origins of human consciousness. He was called the Timothy Leary of the 90s, one of the leading authorities on ontological foundations of shamanism and the intellectual voice of rave culture. And he was kind of a scientist. He had all these theories and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, that's the Scorpio. It's the Venus retrograde for like the love of plants, love of shamanism, love of these things. Scorpio, plus the retrograde, right? Looking backwards, becoming more. It's almost like the retrograde is like the portal into sort of like the mysteries of the past, like bringing in that the past has like the spiritual quality to it. So retrogrades also embody that, and that's why the South Node often is associated with spirituality as well, because it's bringing in that past. And look, Mercury's retrograde right in the first house in Sag, so like the sort of intellectual exploration, if you will, into the mystic things, adventures and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely counterculture kind of guy, very obviously. So yeah, Venus retrograde in general will indicate sort of a uniqueness in Venus related things, like the way they look, what they like, what they're interested in, very quirky, habits or indulgences. The joys may be strange or offbeat. This is 11th house, so it's political, social groups, networks, right? Shamanism could be somewhat of a thing here. Probably more 12th house even. But definitely like the high-mindedness and 6th house. Well, 6 and 7. 7th whole sign house. Interesting. For relationships, but probably carrying some of that 6 as well. The daily work. But still relatively low impact. I mean, Terrence McKenna, probably not that low impact, but it's still just, we're still just talking about Venus. We're not talking about the outer planets or the big gas giants yet. But let's go to an astrologer, Jeffrey Wolf Green, who I actually like. I like that he was a maverick, that he was not just copying what everyone else was doing and just repeating it like a lot of astrologers. They think that's what astrology is. We're just going to read everything that, in a particular, pathway of astrology and we're just going to repeat it. That's not astrology, guys. That's bullshittery. Like, you have to make it your own and you have to, add to it, right? And Jeffrey Wolf Green was that. Like, people are like, I follow Jeffrey Wolf Green. Well, why do you follow Jeffrey Wolf Green? Wasn't like, I follow so and so. He's like, I'm gonna follow astrology, which is what I do. Follow astrology. That's my best advice. Follow astrology. Stop following people. I'm a evolutionary astrologer because I follow Jeff Green. I mean, all you're doing is admitting that you're fucking incapable of understanding astrology for yourself, right? So you got to use somebody else's astrology. Go figure, like, that's not good enough for me. But anyway, Venus retrograde, right on the ascendant, right? So no, he's not going to follow. He's a retrograde kind of person. Scorpio, similar to Terrence McKenna, but obviously different, right? Venus ruling the 12th whole sign house of his own personal psychology, his subconscious mind, and the 7th. So, he was a teacher, a lecturer, counselor. He's got his North Node conjunct Uranus in Gemini in the 8th house, right? And this is very astrological. Of course, so is Scorpio rising, my rising sign. So is Pluto conjunct the MC, right? In Leo and Saturn. So actually, our charts are not that different, right? We have different planets in different places, but personally speaking, it's quite. And then his moon is exactly pretty much opposite mine. 17 Pisces, mine's 19 Virgo, right? So anyway, he had Jupiter on the ascendant. I have Jupiter on the descendant. He has Mercury on the ascendant. I have Mercury on the descendant. Anyway. But yeah, Venus retrograde definitely going to give him a unique style of being and counterculture and also more mystical, right? Especially with the Scorpio rising. A past influence, like something from the past coming to the present, right? Perhaps he was an astrologer in the past. Speculative. I'm not going to make any bold statements like, oh, I know what the past life is. I don't know, neither do you, right? It's also trine his moon, which is really nice. Moon Venus trine, especially because Venus exalts in Pisces, right? The Scorpio, not so much, not great dignity for Venus, but good for psychology, good for astrology, good for understanding the mystical stuff. Yeah. So anyway, one criticism I hate when Jeff Green talks about and I hate when anyone does this, the patriarchy. Like, shut the fuck up. All you're doing is making yourself a victim. That's the way it was. What are you going to change the past? Yeah, we can change the future without ever talking about or the present without ever talking about patriarchy. It's just blaming. It's just being a victim. Just being a fucking pussy. Like, all you're doing is like, oh, they hurt me. The past hurt me. It was men. One gender out of two. The men were really strong and they hurt me. Like, shut the fuck up, you fucking whining piece of shit. Right? Anyone who talks about the patriarchy, I'm just like automatically, you're dumb, you're stupid, shut the fuck up, and shut the fuck up. All right. Let's move on. We can have equality without blaming the past, without being fucking victims. It's stupid. So I hate that. And then all the evolutionary astrologers, they copy him. They're like, anytime you hear an evolutionary astrologer, they're like, the patriarchy, the patriarchy, the patriarchy, because they can't fucking think for themselves. They're all following Jeff Wolf Green. They're like, I'm a Jeff Green puppet, so I have to repeat whatever he says. Fucking idiots. Mariah Carey. They probably don't have any retrogrades. At least not on the ascendant. All right. Mariah Carey is Venus retrograde conjunct Saturn, and that's her ascendant lord. Mariah Carey, like, did she ever grow up? No, she didn't. Mariah Carey never grew up. She's still a little girl, right? Like, okay, she's like what, 55 here, but again, she looks really young and very youthful is more important. Like, okay, we could maybe believe like, okay, she's 55 and she's just aging really well. And like, by the way, same with Madonna. Not that Madonna's, I think Madonna's pretty disgusting looking, but she wants to keep her youth forever. She's like 80 or something, and she's like tried to through plastic surgery tried to look like a little girl. It's fucking disgusting, but that's the retrograde, right? Mariah Carey, I don't think she's in the same class as Madonna. Like, at least it's not like doing all the plastic surgery, or at least if she is, she's keeping it real. It looks natural. Now, like, Madonna looks like a fucking demon. But Mariah Carey looks youthful, right? She looks really young, and she has her own unique style. It's very poppy. It's not my taste at all. Like, I couldn't tell you a single, well, except for that Christmas song that they always play. Like, I don't want to hear anything by Mariah Carey, but she definitely has. She's doing it more like with the sort of like let's be young forever kind of retrograde quality. It's definitely not a more evolved retrograde like some of the others, like Jeff Green or Terrence McKenna, right? But you know, that's what it is. That's what she wants. Could also look to the other house that Venus rules, and that would be sixth house. Interesting. So I don't know, like, her daily routine must be very unusual, right? Foreign, exotic, creative. Yeah, she will not do Don't put her on a routine. Well, although Saturn's there, so it could be interesting, right? It's going to be unique. She'll have her own routine. It'll be retrograde, but Saturn, she'll keep her own Saturnian. It's so tight, that conjunction. She'll keep her own Saturn-9 schedule, right? But not imposed from the outside. That's for sure. All right. Eric Clapton. Not only that, her Venus is, I mean, sorry. Her Venus is not in good dignity. It's in well, it's in Saturn's bounds. Saturn's bounds. It's in Aries, opposite its domicile. But you know, some people say like when a planet is in detriment or debilitated and it's retrograde, it counters the debilitation. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's something interesting, right? It's definitely interesting. And she's definitely not weak as far as like career goes. I mean, she's extraordinarily successful. So there's something unique about this conjunction here with Venus exactly conjunct Saturn, where it's in poor dignity and retrograde. Saturn's also in really poor dignity, but somehow it works, right? But Saturn is in its own bounds. And again, we'd have to go through a lot of further analysis to make sense of that, but I just wanted to point that out. It's interesting. All right, Clapton. Eric Clapton. Venus in Venus's bounds is the ascendant. Also in Venus's bounds. Venus in Venus's bounds. So that's really interesting, right? Ascendant Lord Libra, ascendant Libra in Venus's bounds. Venus and Taurus in Venus's bounds. In the 7th quadrant, 8th whole sign house, but it's retrograde. So very strong Venus here with Eric Clapton. And Venus would be the beauty, the arts, the aesthetics, the creativity. It's retrograde, so he's, you know, it's also opposite Moon. So Moon's playing in there as well. Moon's exalted in Taurus. So Moon is benefiting this Venus, but Moon itself is not in great dignity, right? So this Venus is, you know, and it's pretty close to Mercury, even though Mercury is out of sign. Yeah, this Venus is getting tremendous support. Yeah. So he wasn't, I mean, I guess he was pretty revolutionary at the time in music as far as guitar goes, and his bands, Cream and Eric Clapton and Traffic, right? Was the other band. And he's just a great guitar player, but the retrograde gives him a lot more independence as far as his musical creativity. And sort of like when COVID hit and he got the vaccines and he started shaking and stuff and it ruined his guitar playing. He's like, you know what? Despite what everyone else is saying, you don't have to be vaccinated to come to my shows. And so he was being a bit more independent about that than a lot of other people were. But these people are ridiculous. They're like, oh, you're not vaccinated, you can't come to my shows or whatever, like Neil Young and idiot. He's every right. He was right. Eric Clapton's right. You're right. I mean, so anyway. All right. Now I'm gonna go to Mars. And we got, where is it? I can't find it. Wasn't here. I'm gonna do this. That's your side, Baba. It's in here. I just didn't find it. There it is. Sathya Sai Baba. All right. Probably some of you don't know who he is, so let's pull up his Wikipedia. Alrighty. Indian guru, philanthropist. He claimed that he was a reincarnation of Shirdi Sai Baba, left his home to accept his devotees. They credit him with miracles such as materializations of vibhuti and other small ash objects such as rings, necklaces, watches, along with reports of miraculous hearings, resurrection, clairvoyance, bilocation, and was purportedly omnipotent and omniscient. His devotees believe them to be signs of his divinity, while some individuals have concluded that his acts were based on sleight of hand or had other explanations that were fake and not supernatural. In 1963, Universalist Avatar Meher Baba, who is another enlightened Indian sage, referred to Sathya Sai Baba as the tantric and using tantric powers for his so-called miracles. I have no idea what it was or wasn't, so I can't really say. So anyway, Indian guru. That's really what you need to get out of that. Who performed miracles. And he had Mars retrograde in Taurus in the 6th house. 7th whole sign house. Venus is bound. So Mars is not in good dignity here, right? But it is retrograde. And so the retrograde bringing up themes of the past karma, also like the esoteric mystical qualities. It's his ascendant lord, right? So saying like he's some kind of mystic potentially, right? Not all retrogrades indicate that, but it can. And we see that sometimes, right? The connection to the mystic, connection to the past spiritual realms or something like that, like the portal to like the mystical, right? Remember, retrograde planets mean that they're away from the sun, so they're not getting distorted by the sun. So that's another indication of something a bit more perhaps mystical or spiritual, right? Because the sun is fire, it's burning up all that, and it's creating light and it's creating life, right? But when we get away from the sun, we get into like the outer space, the expanse of the universe, right? We're no longer just like sort of sun focused, we're universe focused. So retrograde planets, especially the outer ones, Mars and out, but even Mercury, Venus to some extent, they're going to have that mystical quality because away from the sun, right? But also revolutionary or counterculture or going against the grain as well. Right? So so yeah, Mars ruling the 6th whole sign, but the 5th quadrant here. So ideas of like, so 5th and 6th, I mean, you could say like entertainment, like he was very entertaining, and then like mundane, daily, practical, whatever life, ascendant lord. So anyway, a lot of Scorpio as well. Mercury in the 1st retrograde as well. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. Definitely not your average, normal, status quo kind of person here. Next, we got James Dean with Mars retrograde as his ascendant lord, right? Uranus on the ascendant, north node. But these are direct. Then Mars retrograde. Mars is ascendant lord. Mars is retrograde. Mars is in conjunct Venus, indicating issues with his own sexuality, which plays out very much so. This is in the 5th whole sign house of Leo. So dude wants to have fun. He wants to get in his car. Mars. People say Mercury's car and Mars's car. Mars get in his car and retrograde. He wants to break the law, right? And he's going to be reckless about it, dangerous. Also spurred on by this Uranus north node, right? Uranus is impatient. Uranus rising is impatient. Uranus connected to the ascendant is impatient. It just speeds you up, right? And that's sort of like, if you want to know my problem, I got Uranus rising and then Mercury in Taurus, where it's like dead slow. And so like it creates a lot of pressure. My mind is moving faster than I can express it. So it just it doesn't come out super smooth. Right? Anyway. Mars retrograde, yeah. And Venus in conjunct Venus. So like 7th house, 10th house. Yeah, so there's a lot of tension here, right? 2nd house. Mars ruling the 8th house. Mars the 8th lord, dispositing his moon, right? It's very dangerous, very reckless, too much energy. And then obviously they came out with the with the car accident that killed him. Yeah. Very bad. Also, I mean, look at this, Jupiter and Pluto in Cancer retrograde. So the Jupiter is quite good here. But definitely indicates something very dangerous in his youth. Pluto particularly, right? Not Jupiter, but excessive success, youthful success, but Pluto is very dangerous. Obviously, Pluto in conjunct the Sun, very dangerous. Sun is our general vitality indicator. Right? So if something is attacking the Sun, it can attack our life. Annie Besant. Now I'm going to pull up her Wikipedia. Also Uranus retrograde, but that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at Mars. Mars retrograde in the second. But she's got a lot of retrograde influences. Uranus and Pluto retrograde in the first, South Node in the first. So mystical, and definitely like without even reading her, also Saturn in Pisces retrograde, Neptune in retrograde in 11th. She's a mystic, right? She's got to be a mystic. She's got to be something like outer planets retrograde in the first houses. Something very out there about her. Was a British socialist, theosophist, Freemason, women's rights and home rule activist, educationalist, and campaigner for Indian nationalism. So revolutionary, a mystic revolutionary. She was an ardent supporter of both Irish and Indian self-rule. She became the first female president of the Indian National Congress in 1917. For 15 years, Besant was public proponent of England of atheism and scientific materialism. She became a prominent speaker, as well as writer, close friend of Charles. But then it seems like she was an atheist at first, but an activist, social activist, right? And then she met Helena Blavatsky, who was an occultist, famous one. And then she became interested in theosophy. And so, yeah, became a mystic. So socialist, mystic, theosophist. She helped to establish Central Hindu School. So she did a lot of stuff, right? And we see like, okay, Pisces in the 12th with Saturn, retrograde, Neptune, and Aquarius, 11th house, retrograde, South Node in the first house, Uranus retrograde, first house, Pluto retrograde, first house, Ascendant Lord Mars retrograde, second house. Very revolutionary, very rebellious, very mystical. Look at this. Moon, Jupiter in the fourth whole sign house, fourth house, fourth quadrant, fourth whole. She's like, so she'll be very popular at home. And she cares a lot about homeland, like Indian homeland, Irish homeland, right? But Mars in the second would be speaking, communicating, and working for resources, I guess, money, security, appearances, but probably lecturing, a lot of lecturing. But just in general, Mars. This must be frustrating, in fact, because it's not great dignity. Mars and Taurus is like difficult. Taurus doesn't want to move, and Mars wants to move, and the retrograde is probably very frustrating here. Because like the other thing about retrograde is like doing things over again, like starting over, starting from scratch, and repeating. So there's something very kind of like repetitive, stubborn, stuck. And wanting to get unstuck about this Mars and Taurus retrograde. But definitely a fighter, rebellious, looking to the past, and the outer, the social influence comes from Uranus. Right? People neglect that. That's very much Uranian quality, social, political concerns. And the Pluto just makes it more intense and more strategic, right? More powerful. Mars is a doer, right? So interesting. Definitely somebody who's stubborn and wants to push against immovable things, right? Mars and Taurus retrograde wants to like, push against rocks, stuff like that. Anyway. All right. Algernon Blackwood. Now, this guy's another obscure individual, but Mars retrograde. Mars retrograde in the 10th whole sign house, but 9th quadrant, right? So something career will also conjunct the North Node, right? So this is Ascendant Lord and sixth whole sign house Lord, but fifth quadrant, and dispositing a whole bunch of planets, Moon, Ceres, Neptune, Jupiter. So it's going to have something to do with his career, his public appearance, very prominent, being seen and heard, creative, Leo, but also 9th house, something about philosophy, religion, adventure, and because I know something, I think he's like wrote books, but let's look at his Wikipedia. He was also an occultist, which fits the bill. Was an English broadcasting narrator, so that's 10th house Leo, journalist, publishing, novelist, and short story writer, and among the most prolific ghost story writers in the history of the genre. Literary critics S.T. Joshi stated, his work is more consistently meritorious than any weird writers except Dunsany's. Okay, I never heard of that guy either. In a short story collection, Incredible Adventures may be the premier weird collection of this or any other century. So weird, right? Weird. It's definitely not a direct motion planet. Weirdness is much more lends itself to retrograde, right? But the mysticism, he was an occultist, a mystic. So that also bring in the Scorpio rising, but the retrograde quality, right? Turning to the past, looking to traditions, and bringing them into the present, mysticism, all of these things. There's the square to Pluto, which is definitely interesting. It's also square the nodes, Pluto, 6 houses. 6 houses can be writer as well, but also South Node, Mercury in the 3rd, right, of course. But yeah. Uranus retrograde also in watery Cancer sign, 8th quadrant. So bring in some more mysticism from there. Now let's go to Jupiter. We got a very obvious one, Frank Zappa. I mean, I don't think anything he does is sort of I mean, he's very retrograde, and let's put it that way. Jupiter retrograde, conjunct Saturn retrograde in the 6th quadrant, 6th whole sign house. No, 5th quadrant, 6th whole sign house. Mixing entertainment and writing and daily routine, daily work, daily grind, right? Jupiter's is ascendant lord. Jupiter is ruling the 4th whole sign house, intercepted there, 3rd quadrant. So that's also going to be helpful for guitar playing and writing. Saturn, it's going to restrict, going to make him much more Saturnian. It's his ascendant lord, right? So he's up against authority and strictness and rules and regulations and fighting against it, but also having to incorporate a lot of Saturnian values into his own being, right? He's got to learn from Saturn. That's part of his karmic lesson, to become more Saturnian. It's conjunct his ascendant lord, but retrograde, right? So Saturnian, but with a retrograde motion. I don't think I need to pull up his Wikipedia. I think most people know who Frank Zappa is, and he's a brilliant man. He's got Mercury in its own bounds in Sag. So it's like poor dignity, good dignity. Sag rising, rocker, obviously, but very intellectual and very excellent at what he does. Saturn probably, makes him a much better musician because it's forcing him to be better at his craft. That's what Saturn does. It's like, no, work harder, do better, do it better, right? So yeah. And the retrograde makes him more rebellious, and he's anything but, like status quo. He's one of the quintessential rebel rockers, like a real rebel rockers, right? Like, forget Nicki Sixx with his, gay looking outfits and hair. Um, Frank Zappa is a real, high stakes retrograde kind of person. He's got Saturn and Jupiter, ascending Lord Jupiter and Saturn. Yeah. Um, yeah. Saturn's ruling the second and third, so still very relevant for singing and playing guitar and writing and all that. Here's one: Barron Trump. Very unusual. Now, Barron Trump has Mercury conjunct Uranus in Pisces, on the ascendant in Jupiter's bounds, which is really interesting, right? Mercury's retrograde. But then if we look to Jupiter's retrograde in Scorpio. So, I mean, think about Barron Trump for a minute. Like, what's your predict? He also has Pluto conjunct the MC, basically, within a few degrees. Um, really interesting. Sun in Pisces. So he's kind of like a bit mystical, right? Because all this Pisces, 3 planets and ascendant in Pisces with Mercury. Mercury Pisces hears voices. They can be crazy, don't get me wrong, but they can also be mystics. They can be like, or highly creative. They can tap into the netherworlds. He's highly intuitive, right? Uranus and Mercury in Pisces, right on his ascendant. He's like hearing shit from the other world. Jupiter in Scorpio retrograde. Come on. It's square Neptune. Okay, the square is not great, but the Neptune is further. It's a tight square. I mean, dude's super esoteric and mystical. I mean, it's crazy, right? So I don't know what he's going to turn out to be. This is also ninth house. I would call this a ninth house Jupiter, right? It's trying the ascendant. So it's pretty good. It's in Scorpio, but it's ninth house. So he's gonna study scorpionic things, psychology. I mean, if he wanted to be a bit more mundane, he could be an excellent psychologist. Not psychiatrist, psychologist, much more like, therapeutic kind of, talk it out kind of thing. He doesn't have a scientific mind. He's got a good mind, but it's just much more mystical or artistic, creative, esoteric, watery, right? Something like that. Yeah. Also, even part of Fortune's playing in there in Cancer. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. It should be interesting to see how he grows up. He's definitely not going to be status quo, that's for sure. Super tall, by the way. Yeah. Agatha Christie. Um, Jupiter, retrograde, second house, Aquarius. Let me just pull up her Wikipedia. All right. Now she's one of the premier. She's like the best. Let's see what it says. All right, she wrote fictional detective novels, murder mysteries. Some of you probably know her a lot better than I do. I've never read any of her books. She's the best-selling fiction writer of all time. Okay. Her novels have sold more than 2 billion copies. Okay. Super fiction writer. The premier fiction writer. Mystery writer of America's Grand Master. Oh, that's an award. One of the best mystery writers of all time. Okay. I was doing research before, and some of these I kind of forget like exactly what I found. And I should do a better job. That's my Virgo moon. It's like, you didn't do a good enough job. You better do better. Better do better. All right. So she's like, she has like a lot of mystical influence as well. Spiritualism, paranormal, like dead people, ghosts. I don't know. There's a lot to read. But Christie said to herself, "My chief dislikes are crowds, loud noises, gramophones, and cinemas." Huh. I can definitely relate to the dislike of crowds and loud noises. She doesn't like alcohol or smoking. Good for her. She doesn't like a lot of stuff. She was a member of the Church of England. She never cared much for. All right. Anyway, um, so let's see. She was in the church. I would not think she's religious. I don't think she was religious. I think she probably did it for whatever reason, to be social or whatever. Jupiter retrograde is generally not, especially in Aquarius, it's not going to be religious. It is, or if they're religious, they are kind of unorthodox religious. Um, but second house is aesthetics, right? It's adornments, it's beauty, it's what we put on. So this Jupiter is going into like the not necessarily the expression, although Jupiter is ruling the third house as well, third quadrant, I should say, fourth whole sign. But and this is the third quadrant, third whole sign, right? So it's mixing second, third, fourth, first, second, third, fourth, all mixing together. Combining energies in different ways. It's Jupiter is also in Mercury's bounds, so it's really interesting. Uranus conjunct the MC, but the retrograde, I definitely think, especially in Aquarius, would give her Jupiter retrograde in Aquarius, a connection to sort of like the mystical realm, especially in Aquarius, like something woo woo, like really tapping into some strange vibes potentially from the past, right? Ghostly qualities, esoteric things. It's also opposite Chiron, and that's important to remember. Chiron brings incredible uniqueness. Yeah, can be wounds, right? Can be deformities, but oftentimes what it just means is somebody can be extremely creative and stand out in their field because they're so unique. So, right. Sharon Tate. Next one. All right, she's got Jupiter retrograde in Cancer right on her ascendant. Uh, ascendant in Jupiter's bound, so pretty strong ascendant. Um, so obviously Moon is not going to be able to go retrograde, but this one, so some of these are, Jupiter is the ascendant Lord retrograde, some of these Jupiter retrograde on the ascendant. For her, it's sixth and ninth houses. She's got a packed eighth house, right? And she died. So Sharon Tate, for those of you who don't know, she's an American actress and model. During the 60s, she played small television roles before appearing in films. It was regularly featured in magazines as a model and cover girl. She also had some nude scenes in movies and also posed for Playboy. So definitely not afraid of being nude. After receiving positive reviews for comedic and dramatic acting appearances, Tate was hailed as one of Hollywood's most promising newcomers. Then tragedy strikes. All right. She was in, movies, and then she was killed. August 9th, 1969, Tate and four other members were murdered by members of the Manson family, Charles Manson, in the home she shared with her husband. Was it Francis Ford Coppola? Is that right? He was a producer at the time of her death, and she was 8.5 months pregnant. Jupiter Cancer retrograde. Wow. Sixth house. I mean, conflict, but really, I think it's more down to like a lot of these eighth house planets, and then the eighth lord. I'm not really trying to go into her death, but these are retrograde too. But generally speaking, I mean, she was kind of a rebel, not like a major one, but like she's very sexy, sexual, really didn't mind. So about her nudity. I have no qualms about it at all. I don't see any difference between being stark naked or fully dressed. It's part of the job and it's done with meaning and intention. Honestly, don't understand the big fuss made over nudity and sex in films. It's silly on TV. The children can watch people murdering each other, which is a very unnatural thing, but they can't watch two people in the very natural process of making love. Now, really, that doesn't make any sense, does it? So that's a very retrograde kind of attitude, right? Especially Jupiter in Cancer, which is going to be much more like expanding Cancerian themes, which as a woman, that would include, especially in the body, right? Like her nudity, right? Her sexuality, her being a woman. So yeah. But ironic, right? Ironic. Cancer also a water sign with the retrograde planet in it and ascendant, um, perhaps bringing up issues of the past, perhaps even um, indicating karmic lessons brought from the past. It's just speculative, right? I don't know that this is in any way, shape, or form relating to a murder. Pluto in the first quadrant retrograde also. So yeah, interesting. Can't draw any conclusions, but interesting. All right. Elton John, Jupiter retrograde, Scorpio. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Um, Elton John, oops. I touched the coordinate. It just reset it. So Elton John, uh, legendary musician and gay. He's gay. I mean, that's not anything. That is what it is. But his whole persona, his whole act, his whole thing is quite retrograde. It's not pulling in any sort of mysticism, like even though it's in Scorpio and 12th house, it's just highly creative, right? And highly sort of independent. He's not derivative, Elton John, right? You got to give him his credit. Like he's not derivative at all. He's not like copying anyone. And that's one of the things about retrograde is that, yeah, you might think that it actually is derivative because it's pulling from the past. Actually, it's not, because it's when a planet's retrograde, you can do things sort of restart over and over and over again, and in a sense, you can become more progressive because you're not copying. You're not just building on what just the last thing that came before you, which is the direct. It's like the last step. If you're a planet's direct, it's going to go step, 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 step. Everything that came before you, you're going to add one on top of that. Planet retrograde is going to be like, no, we're not doing everything. We're going to ignore the stuff that other people are doing. We're going to go back and we're going to start over. We're going to do it all. We're just going to, we're starting over. It's almost like a start over indicator, right? Let's start over. Let's do it again. Not good enough. And so they perfect their skills. They perfect their art, and through repetitions, and they create unique, original things because of that, right? So it's very apparent with Elton John, and it's one of the reasons he was so successful. Plus, his outfits are so like ridiculous, but like artistic and creative and flamboyant, right? Over the top, not copying, not status quo, opposite the sun, just being completely himself, right? Um, Jimmy Fallon, Mr. Fallon, Mr. Jimmy Criminal. He's a felon. I'm just kidding. So Jupiter's the ascendant lord, and it's in Pisces and it's retrograde. Ascendant is in its own bounds, Jupiter. So it's really strong, Jupiter here. And to be honest with you, I struggle a little bit with this one, but the whole point is like I'm not gonna cherry pick, and I'm not just gonna be like, Ignore the ones that are less obvious. And Jimmy Criminal, Jimmy Gangster is a little less obvious. I'm just teasing. I have nothing against him. Um, but he was a comedian, obviously. Is a comedian. And maybe I just don't know him well enough. But he seems pretty status quo to me. But Retrograde is going to be in there somewhere. And he wanted to be on SNL. I don't know, maybe some of you guys have a better idea about it than I do, but he just seems like, let's look at his personal life. Um I'm sorry, I'm just trying to scan it really quickly to see if there's anything. He was raised Roman Catholic. He expressed his fondness for Latin Mass, but he stated he was no longer a regular church goer. Okay, I mean that's a minor Jupiter retrograde quality, but yeah. Um, so he had some health problems. Um, you know what? It's probably because of his Pisces rising. Um, Look at it. He almost has like this deer in headlights kind of look. Like he's really just like he doesn't know what's going on because he's on Pisces La La Land. But and that's probably why it's a little obfuscated. Let me just see here. Um, yeah, I know some of you are like, oh, you should have been prepared. Well, I thought I was. But there's a lot of charts, and I'm a Gemini, so you know. Anyway, I think it's probably there if we dig deep enough, but it's like so obscure and obfuscated. It's like Pisces, Jupiter, and retrograde. I mean, it's like what is it like? Do we even notice when like the water is going one way or another way in the middle of the ocean? It's like, okay, it's going a direction. We don't care. I'm just teasing. I don't know. But anyway, it's very Piscean, so it's very confusing, right? But he does have Jupiter retrograde on his ascendant. So apparently he is pretty retrograde, but maybe it's like the same with Pisces just because it's Pisces. It is square the nodes too. Um, Interesting. It's also his ascendant lord, right? Jimmy Fallon. So like whenever the MC is on the ascendant, it's a clear indication that their name will be a big part of their career, right? They themselves will be, who what their career is about. Right. Zoe Deschanel. She's interesting, very Capricornian. Saturn. Where's Saturn? Okay, so we're in Saturn territory. We're in Saturn land. Saturnial. Saturn. There we go. Saturn's in Virgo retrograde, along with a stationary Mars and Jupiter retrograde, all in Virgo. Ninth whole sign house, but eighth quadrant. So here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to say about Zoe Deschanel. Her ascendant lord is in the eighth quadrant, although arguably in the ninth house because ninth whole sign house. So mixing eighth and ninth house things. It is Virgo and she's Capricorn. So her appearance is very earthy, right? And very kind of um she does not appear retrograde. She does not appear to be, she appears quite status quo, in other words. Even if, I mean, well, she got Uranus in Scorpio in the 10th, right? But she's like normal girl, right? Cute girl next door. But at the same time, I think she's hiding her actual true, there's something hidden, and that's tying in the eighth quadrant, right? That she's hiding her true nature. It is Virgo, so it hides well. Virgos appear very buttoned up, right? They say like Virgos are freaking in bed, like they just appear very normal and conservative on the outside, but underneath they're not. So I think there's some of that quality. Of course, she's Saturn ascendant, right? So ruled by Saturn. So she's going to have that very Saturnian quality. But there's something also hidden. This Mars, Saturn Mars. Mars is applying to Saturn, but so is Jupiter, right? So it's not like dark or evil, but there's a certain quality of hers that is quite rebellious that she's hiding. Right. Jupiter is also trine Chiron, which is retrograde. So yeah. So I think it's like this thing where she like appears one way, underneath it's another. But I wonder if there's anything we can find in her Wikipedia that okay, I have it queued up to her personal life. She's allergic to eggs, dairy products, and soy. She has a gluten allergy. That's that Virgo, Ascendant Lord, Saturn in Virgo, which but also stated in 20 armchair expert that she no longer suffers from it. She used to be vegan. Um, Vegan, okay. Saturn retrograde in Virgo, but she found it difficult to eat enough calories. All right. She was featured on Top Chef. So her diet's very restricted, vegan, Saturn, retrograde, Virgo. She's a pescatarian. Um, so she became engaged to Ben Gibbard, lead vocalist of Death Cab for Cutie, which is like a modern rock band. Um, okay, but she seems so conservative. But here she's marrying a rock star, right? So probably not so conservative. Um, okay, she married somebody else, blah blah blah. Okay, not a whole lot going on there, but we can see like with the physical stuff, definitely. But I think also there's just because of that eighth house quality that she's hiding some of her actual more extreme or more uh consequential retrograde qualities. See what this says. Hated all the traveling. I'm really happy now that I had the experience, but at the time I was just so miserable to have to leave my friends and go places where they didn't have any food I liked or things I was used to. That's also like the ninth whole sign house influence. The travel, Saturn, Virgo, retrograde. So yeah. Um anyway, Zoe Deschanel. She's keeping it hidden. All right. Now a very obvious retrograde person, William Burroughs. Huge Aquarius stellium. Um, Saturn, Ascendant Lord, retrograde in Gemini, conjunct the moon, Pluto, part of fortune, fourth house, but Gemini, right? And he wrote Naked Lunch, if you don't know. He was a writer and a drug addict, probably an alcoholic. His primary figure of the Beat Generation, modern pop culture. Burroughs wrote 18 novels and novellas, 5 books. Um, let's see. I'm not going to read all this. Anyway, he was pretty popular, and he wrote some weird, very strange, drug-induced books. And there's probably a whole lot of other controversies around him because drinking and drugs, right? A lot of that, right? A lot of air, tons of air. So probably very, very smart, but also North Node conjunct Chiron in Pisces. So like the creativity and the weirdness. Go watch Naked Lunch, you'll see this. This is Chiron. That's not wounded healing. That's nothing to do with that. It's especially in this regard, it's weirdness, it's strangeness, it's Piscean creativity out of the box, just like to the extreme. But anyway, Saturn, the ascendant lords conjunct the moon. It's retrograde in Gemini, so it's like, okay, writing a lot, right? Writing a lot with a lot of, connected to his moon. His emotions are out there, right? Very tight there. And that's not an easy combination. Moon conjunct Saturn. So the Saturn's retrograde. It's very restrictive on the heart, on the emotions. But at the same time, Saturn is his ascendant lord, so it's going to make him more expressive, but he's going to have to do it in a very Saturnian way. Saturn's also ruling the 12th house, so it's bringing in a lot of creativity there as well. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing prograde about William Burroughs. I mean, I mean that's an exaggeration, but he's very retrograde. Like his whole thing is retrograde. It's just doing its own thing. It's going its own way, not influenced by the sun. All right. Now we go to Miss Megan Fox. Megan Fox has this exalted Mars on the ascendant, and Venus is bound, right? And we can see like it. I love planets on the ascendant because I shouldn't be talking about this. I should be talking about her ascendant lord, but it really shows up in her face so much, and it's the pure expression. People got this wrong. People think like planets conjunct the sun are like the most accurate expression of that planet. Wrong. It's completely being overshadowed by the sun. You're getting a personality that's infused with the perfume of that planet when you have planets conjunct the sun. If you want to see the pure expression of a planet, look at it conjunct the ascendant. Then the sun is not ruining the effects, right? Or hijacking it or taking it over. It's a pure, unburned influence of this. Even Kazemi's sun, not nearly as pure or as whole or full as the expression of a planet conjunct the ascendant. So she's got it right on the ascendant. And she's sexy, but she's not like beautiful or gorgeous, right? She's just kind of like very like it's Martian, right? There's like sex appeal, right? But not like this, not like Marilyn Monroe's exotic beauty, right? So Saturn's retrograde in it's the 12th whole sign, but 11th quadrant. So 12th whole sign for movies, cinema, you know, all that, the creative imagination, but 11th for her career success, popularity, fan base, groups, networks, friends, all that. So it's pretty interesting. Also, Uranus is here retrograde, so I imagine she has some social consciousness, some social awareness. But let's pull up her Wikipedia, see what we can see there. Well, we know that she married pretty much okay, so her first boyfriend was Brian Austin Green. Who is he? Okay, that guy. Um, all right. Fox has a form of club thumb. I don't know if that's related. She has OCD. That could be definitely related. Saturn, fear, and like the retrograde is like repetition, doing things over and over again. So insecurities, self-harming. Well, it's also Mars too, right? And has acknowledged that she has low self-esteem. Also, probably very much related to retrograde, right? Because retrograde is internalizing energy rather than externalizing. And it's Saturn, fear-based. Right? She said that her Christian faith is still very important to her. Um, and who did she marry? She married like the most thuggy criminal, white gangster rapper out there, Machine Gun Kelly. Like the two of them are like, drinking each other's blood. Pretty fucking gross. Uh, but hey, whatever, you know. Wild and crazy sex pot. And the perception of her is false because she is asocial. Interesting. Saturn, right? Saturn retrograde. Fox said that she would rather stay at home instead of going out and emphasized that she cannot have sex with someone she does not love. She's bisexual and she believes all humans are born with the ability to be attracted to both sexes. But that's also Ascendant Lord conjunct Uranus. Um, no question in my mind about being bisexual. Ascendant Lord conjunct Uranus. Um, that's not to say that anytime somebody has their Ascendant Lord conjunct Uranus, that's going to be the result. It's easier for women, more natural, I guess. I mean, it's more common anyway. Um, blah, blah, blah. She has several tattoos, including a Chinese symbol. That's pretty cliche for strength. Oh my God. Talk about lame. All right. I don't know what else to say about her. probably a lot more we could, but like I'm just trying to get the general. I mean, you can do your own research too, but I have a lot to go through. But anyway, um, yeah, Saturn's also ruling the second house, so that actually has a lot to do with her self-esteem, right? That's where we get our self-esteem, our image. That's why she wants to hide. It's 12th whole sign, so it's like, yeah, her image is in the 12th, so it's movies and cinema, but in real life it's more hidden. And guarantee you she's very socially conscious. I just didn't want to waste the time to pull that out find out where that's hiding in her in the Wikipedia. All right. Let's see. Okay. Next we have Lord. Um, don't know her music, but okay. I know I listened to Royals, and it definitely has a retrograde feel to it, right? Because of its uniqueness. Uh, Saturn retrograde conjunct South Node in Aries, right? So her health is probably a little bit delicate, because it's Ascendant Lord in Aries, or retrograde. Um, this is gonna keep her youthful again. Obviously, if the Ascendant Lord is retrograde or there's retrogrades on the Ascendant, youth oriented. This is fourth house, so also indicating, and South Node, uh, prominent, like early rise in her prominence, but retrograde indicating that um she's going to be different. She's going to be unique. It's not status quo. It's going to be more of a pure expression of what she's trying to do, and that's uh, so one of her strengths, right? She's using it to her advantage to make interesting music that is not just a repetition of whatever has come before. It's something new. It's a starting over. Right? I think that comes through if you listen to her songs. Um, like I said, I only know one song. It's Royals, and it's my research. I don't like that kind of music. It's boring for me, but it is a little more interesting, right? And I can see why she's famous for it. And the lyrics also are, I don't remember. Like, we could never be royals, but we could be royal, or I don't know, something about royalty. But yeah, interesting. All right. Um, okay. Jim Jones is next. It's very obvious. Yeah, Capricorn rising, Saturn in Capricorn retrograde, in Saturn's bounds. So what did he do? Um, he was like a religious preacher, and then he got a bunch of people to like reject society and move to a town in South America and be part of his cult. And then, when things got bad, he had them all drink Kool-Aid, not by persuasion or not by mental verbal persuasion, but by persuasion with a gun, right? He had armed security, and you know, he basically said, if you don't drink the Kool-Aid, we'll kill you. Very nice man. Um, so yeah. Uh, but the retrograde is sort of like a return or moving away from, right? Moving away from the sun, moving away from society. Saturn in Capricorn, talking about structure, social structures, right? Organizations. So he's like an organization moving away from society. Obviously, it's not the only way it can go. There can be many different expressions of this. Just because somebody has Saturn in Capricorn retrograde in the first house does not mean they're going to be a Jim Jones. But they're going to have some retrograde Saturnian quality. We'll see that. I mean, it is as opposed to Pluto and Jupiter in the seventh, so very manipulative, but also like bringing this very big, Jupiter carrying Jupiterian Cancer, loving big, guru teacher quality into it, but also manipulation, obsessive manipulation and control with Pluto. But anyway, yep. Saturn also ruling the second house of appearances and speech. right? Talking. All right. This one's great. I love this one. Sean Connery. Because it's so funny. So he also has Saturn retrograde right on the ascendant. But this one is really, I'm just going to pull up a clip because it's just so awesome. Now please don't, like, I hope you're not offended by this, but I don't think you should be. This is a great interview with with who's it? They just take forever to load. Barbara Walters. This is just a short clip. So I have so many pages open. It's just taking forever. You can really see the retrograde when he starts explaining himself. Retrograde Saturn in Capricorn on the ascendant.
I know Sean Connery regrets this conversation.
Okay. You did an interview in which you
Probably.
said the worst thing to slap a woman now and then. As I remember, you said you don't do it with a clenched fist. It's better to do it with an open hand. Yeah. Remember that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
I didn't love that.
I haven't changed my opinion.
You haven't.
No, not at all.
You think it's good to slap a woman?
No, I don't think it's good.
You don't think it's bad?
I don't think it's that bad. I think that it depends entirely on the circumstances and if it merits it. Yeah.
Or what would merit it?
Well, if you have tried everything else, and women are pretty good at this, they can't leave it alone. They don't want to have the last word, and you give them the last word, but they're not happy with the last word. They want to say it again, and get into a really provocative situation. Then I think it's absolutely right.
By the way, Sean Connery has been married to Micheline for 31 years, and we have not heard a single complaint.
I mean, that might be pretty inflammatory to some people, but there are way more inflammatory things in real life, in real action, like that people do and get involved with. So it's like, okay, like, yeah, you can call him a misogynist. That's fine. I'm not going to argue with him. I'm not going to say that he's right, or wrong or whatever. It's just his opinion, and it's great. It demonstrates the Saturn in Capricorn retrograde. Saturn's obviously in domicile. But it's not going along with convention, right? He doesn't care. He's not going to go along with the sun, right? The sun would represent the status quo, what everyone thinks, what you're supposed to say in a situation like that. Oh no, we should never, ever, ever slap a woman. Like, I'm not condoning it, right? Like, but hey, he said it, but it really represents that. So I'll just leave it at that. Fascinating. All right, let's go to Uranus. And now, with the outer planets, it gets a little more interesting and fun. And we're going to go to everyone's favorite dictator, Adolf Hitler. Okay, a little bit far from the ascendant, but it's in the same old sign house, Libra, retrograde. And so, we could tie it to, I see, fourth house, right? But homeland, right? He's concerned about his homeland, and he's got radical ideas. 12th house. So my take on the first whole sign house behind the ascendant, 12th quadrant, is that it becomes much more mental, right? And yes, there's somewhat a less awareness the further away it gets from the ascendant, right? But it is less about the physicality and the face. There's still an influence, but it's more about the brain and the mind, not the brain, the mind. Because this is the head, and this is like behind the head, right? So it's like in the thought realm. So radical ideology, right? Libra, air sign, about relationships, radical relationship, radical, especially retrograde Uranus is going to be way more radical, right? And even mystical, right? Because remember, the Nazis were not just about killing Jews and gypsies and taking over all of Europe or whatever. They were also about the esoteric and occult stuff, right? So that also Uranus retrograde. And also, I mean, Neptune and Pluto in the 8th, so that's bringing in some of that as well. But yeah, I mean, radical, right? Like revolutionarily radical. You know, Uranus is kind of radical in its own way, but if it's retrograde, it's really radical. Right? Enough said. Now we got a young pop star. Also with the very tight conjunction with that 90s conjunction, early 90s. Neptune, Uranus in Capricorn, run the ascendant in Venus's bounds, Ariana Grande. And Ariana Grande, I mean, I don't know, like, yeah, I mean, she is pretty retrograde, kind of, you know. Wait. All right. I think I have it queued up here because there's probably something relevant. So she's drawing inspiration from the past, which is interesting, right? That retrograde quality. Grande's modest look early in her career is described as age appropriate in comparison to contemporary artists. Also, because the outer planets are so slow, the retrograde can really slow down a person's development. Right? Same with Hitler. He spent his first half of life like trying to be an artist, or first portion of his life, and getting rejected in that way. She, yeah, Ariana Grande has success, but it's saying like she was age appropriate, meaning like she wasn't moving ahead of herself when she's young. The development of the retrograde happens a little bit later. The progression of the retrograde, I should say. The trailblazing quality of the retrograde. Okay. She abandoned her earlier stuff. Okay, short skirts. Okay, so her looks were becoming more evocative, provocative, but it took time. She also began wearing cat and bunny ears, and subsequently oversized jackets and hoodies. Definitely a retrograde quality there on her, you know, on her body. It's often imitated by social media influencers and celebrities after years of dyeing her hair red. And for her role as a cat Valentine on Nickelodeon, she wore extensions. Noted that her iconic high ponytail, that would be also be the outer planets retrograde on her ascendant. It's received more attention than her fashion choices. Criticism for impolite interactions with reporters and fans. She would dismiss the reports as weird, inaccurate depictions. Some may cry diva. There's also Grant is taking a stand to not allow others to control her image. So yeah, I don't know. There's probably a lot of stuff here. And she is a pretty sort of unique, very unique individual, and iconic, especially for her looks. Her music, I don't even know any of her songs, to be honest. I'm not gonna say it's good or bad. It's probably bad because, well, otherwise I would listen to it. But in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, she's still young, but we'll probably see more of that retrograde stuff come out, you know, as she grows, because that's going to be something that takes time to mature. Right? She's so young, 1993, right? Was she 30, I guess. 30. Yeah, 30. So it's still very young. But yeah, definitely in her appearance and her looks that comes out. But as she gets older, we'll see a lot more of this. play out in her life. Also, her like boyfriends are weird, like Pete Davidson, covered in tattoos, scorpionic. Here's a really obvious one. Kurt Cobain. Again, similar to Grande, but different planets. He's got the 60s conjunction. She had the 90s conjunction. Both retrograde, both tightly conjunct his ascendant, Pluto and Uranus. Right. And we know what happened to Kurt Cobain. We know the impact he had. He broke through the cheesy glam metal scene. Of course, there was, not all metal was, some of it was pretty non-cheesy, but heavy. And he became, a rock star and a very admired and respected one and loved one, beloved one. And then he died. But yeah, definitely trailblazing, groundbreaking, not following so the sun would be just like if he was following the sun, if he did not have retrograde planets, especially the outer ones, these very powerful 60s conjunction on his ascendant, he just would have been another cheesy glam metal band and been, gay. I'm calling it gay, not homosexual, just gay, right? And we probably wouldn't even know his name, but because of the retrogrades, he's like, fuck that, I'm gonna do my own thing and make it better, and he did. Jupiter's also retrograde, so retrogrades, they can be excellent, and they can also be pretty terrible. They can go all sorts of ways. Let's see here. Now we got a fairly mundane one of these, so I just want to show you the gamut. Chris Evans, right? Pretty boring guy, in fact. Definitely not a revolutionary, definitely not Kurt Cobain. But okay, so I pulled up some stuff. Like we know like he was just like a normal actor, and then he got this role as Captain America, which very much does point to the Uranus opposite Chiron, Scorpio Taurus kind of thing. But so he's a follower of Buddhism. Okay. He's a fan of New England Patriots. That's very prograde and boring and like dumb. But whatever, narrated the documentary. All right. Very boring, very mundane. He affirmed his support for same-sex marriage. Okay, great. Really standing out on a limb there. But it is Uranian, so he's gonna have political views, right? Critical of Donald Trump's presidency. How unusual. This is like every idiot everywhere, right? Whatever. If you're not worried about Roe v. Wade, you're not paying attention. So he's got like he seems like a very unevolved human being, just to be honest. Like no, he seems like spiritually like a baby. He's a spiritual baby, and that's why it's coming out this way. But he is like starting to like he's like interested in politics, social issues, philanthropy, stuff like that. It's just he's not very evolved. And even Jeff Wolf Green, the astrologer, was saying, you don't always know the level of, you can't tell by the chart like how evolved somebody is spiritually. So the point of this is like really to show reality that somebody can have a powerful planet like Uranus in Scorpio retrograde right on their ascendant in Scorpio, right? And still they can just be barely scratching the surface of what that really means, right? I think it has much more to, I said it was opposite Chiron, it's not. There's a mild opposite, I mean, 7 degrees, but anyway, this has much more to do with his acting career. Like he's playing Captain America, and it's Uranian. I mean, it's Chironic as well. It's Neptunian. It's because it's fantasy, right? And it's something very like a superhero is something very like powerful. I don't know. It progressive, I guess you could say. It's not the one I would expect for Uranus and Scorpio retrograde, but it is what it is. I mean, that's I mean, he's playing a major role in a film, and so I think that's largely how it's coming out, because he's not he's not evolved enough to really represent these planets. These are big energies. He's kind of like a baby. So, you know, he's just starting to give him another 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, another few lifetimes, really. Those he'll express those better. All right. Casey. Edgar Casey. Now he's a real representative of Uranus retrograde. It's in Leo. Fire sign, but it's still, right? He's got so much water, 8th house, 8th whole sign house, 8th quadrant, right? Pluto. And Casey is an evolved soul, right? And Edgar Casey clearly represents the mysticism of the retrograde, Uranus retrograde, powerful outer planet. And that's the thing with these outer planets. Like, so everyone has these outer planets in their chart. Not everyone has access to them because of their spiritual evolution, even if they're on angles. Chris Evans, perfect example. He's just status quo. He's just like he's just barely scraping the surface of what Uranus retrograde in Scorpio represents. Edgar Casey really embodying Uranus retrograde on the ascendant. Just it's obvious. We don't even need to go into it. Like, he was a sleeping prophet. He was a mystic. He was a spiritualist. He was esoteric, a occultist. He was highly psychic, right? One of the most well-known psychics ever. So yeah, powerful intuition here from Uranus retrograde, tapping into the mystical realms, right? Uranus on the other side of the earth, away from the sun. The sun is not going to burn up those subtle spiritual rays received from Uranus. That's the thing about the sun. It's not subtle. It's going to burn all the subtlety out of it, whatever it is. Right? So a retrograde planet on the ascendant is a very, very pure form of that planet. Okay. Usain Bolt. Here's another expression of Uranus retrograde on the ascendant in a very different way. Usain Bolt, the fastest man alive. Uranus in Sag retrograde. Another indicator of another quality association of Uranus is speed. Uranus wants to get it now. And Sag, the arrow, the legs, very much relates to fast running. Right. There's probably some other things. So the retrograde also indicates sort of like the first of all, the reluctance to mature. Initially he was uncommitted. He's like kind of not caring about his career. And then it took him time to really grow into it and really accept it. He was a trickster, very Uranian quality, joking, always messing around. So much. He's the fastest man alive. Well, for dancing. Lightning bolt. So his name is so he's a Catholic. He suffered from scoliosis, which actually makes sense because Uranus is very unstable energy, and it's pertaining to the body on the ascendant. Causes an uneven stride. This is left leg. Popularized the lightning bolt pose, which is amazing, right? Because that's this pose that because of Uranus on the ascendant. It is retrograde, but yeah, I mean that's the mark of the real pure expression of that, the independent one, the independent Uranus, the Uranus that is not influenced by the sun. He was involved, they stole money from him. I don't know. I don't know if that's related, but perhaps a karmic indicator. He's been in other sports, entrepreneurship. Oh, here we go. Co-founded electric scooter company Bolt Mobility, right? Electric, Sag Mobility. I think that's really interesting. A music producer, Uranus again, music, rhythm, beat. And just to clarify, I don't think Uranus is the only thing that can indicate rhythm or drums or anything like that, but it often does. So yeah. Interesting, because I think here's what's happening is like the retrograde is like sort of like repeat, 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 get better, get better, get better, and makes him the fastest man alive. Practice, right? Start over. Let's do it again. Not good enough. Neptune's also retrograde here. Yeah, really interesting. The point here is not to give you like all the answers. I'm not trying to be like, yes, this is the, prepackaged, ribbon bowed, tied, neatly done for you thing that you just have to swallow. It's about understanding what it is in real life, right? And I don't have every single answer, but I don't think I need to. We're just learning, we're looking, and some things are less obvious, some things are more obvious. But I don't think this is unobvious. I'm not saying this is not obvious that his Uranus is retrograde. It's just that this is a different expression, and it's going to be different always, and that's one of the really cool things. I'm throwing myself in here because I also have Uranus retrograde on the ascendant in Scorpio, and obviously North Node. And so this is an indicator, a couple things. Number one, Uranus can be trauma, and so, and I do have past trauma. I do, especially in Scorpio, the retrograde, bring in karmic past issues. I was slow to mature, right? Especially like in terms of career, but that could be for other reasons, Saturn as well. But definitely the trauma held me back. The retrograde also being more of the pure quality, being that the sun's over here, Earth's in the middle, Uranus is over here. So Uranus not being influenced by the sun, retrograde, right? Not going along with society, being more independent, more rebellious, more Uranian. Also gives me more of an edge with astrology, because now Uranus is connecting with outer space rather than the sun being the status quo representative, right? So yeah. Excellent for astrology, for occultism, for psychology, for understanding secrets and things like that. Definitely makes me pretty Uranian. Surprise. Speeds me up, makes me very impatient, right? So like I don't get very long-winded because like I'm very, very wound up and intense, tons of anxiety, tons of nerves, right? And then my Mercury is in stubborn Taurus and is very slow itself on a fixed star algol, and it just doesn't want to be very elaborate. It's in fixed earthy Taurus, so it wants to keep things very simple and grounded, right? So I'm not gonna go on some big philosophical tangents, or if I go on a philosophical tangent, it's not gonna be that big, not gonna be that long-winded. And sometimes I under-explain things because I'm like, I'd rather, say what's essential than like talk to you like you're an idiot. And now I'm getting sidetracked. All right. Where are we? Okay. We are going to move on to Neptune. And Joseph Mengele, the Nazi doctor who was experimenting on twins and genetics and all that. So Neptune, even more expansive, esoteric, mystical, imaginative, creative, nebulous, without boundaries, right? The subconscious, the dream world, all kinds of esoteric, spiritual, intuitive connections here with this combination. But really the imagination is like going wild when it's this is a very mystical placement, right? With Neptune, especially in water sign with retrograde. Because again, not being influenced by the sun, so more pure esoteric rays from Neptune, right? In watery Cancer. And going against society, right? Going against the sun. I'll just read here, I guess. So he did horrible experiment. So he's nicknamed Angel of Death. He performed horrible experiments on Jews and other, like gypsies, I think even Catholics, and horrible, soulless kind of person. He developed an interest in music and skiing. So music, definitely Neptunian. I think it's fairly obvious. I don't think we need to look too deep to understand how the retrograde plays out. Really dark kind of life, but there's no indication about this, about like quality of soul of the individual, right? It's just about having this imagination that is very potent and has no concern for the direction of society, right? It doesn't really care what society thinks. It's going to do what it wants to do, which is, the retrograde quality. So he's very imaginative, very curious, very expansive, thinking, imagining, dreaming, all that. Also South Node Jupiter, retrograde, Scorpio, 5th house, entertainment, trying the Ascendant. So his philosophy is very dark, also not concerning itself with what society thinks. It's just going to be all scorpionic and scientific, curious, right? Scorpios like wants to take things apart. He's going to take people apart. Right? Not very nice. Prince William. Prince William. Neptune and Sag retrograde. And we have Jupiter retrograde also in Scorpio. So he's quite a retrograde kind of person. Prince William. And he does a lot of stuff, right? And he doesn't have to. So I'm just gonna be like perfectly neutral about this because yeah, there's like, oh, he's super rich and all that, but he does stuff, right? And he doesn't have to. Why does he do stuff? Okay, so Neptune influence, Jupiter influence, Sag influence, conservation, mental health, homelessness, sport is just whatever. But these are all outer planet influences, right? And he's not going to be concerned with what other people think. He's just going to do what he feels is right. I'm not going to get into the details, but he uses his privilege, his money, his status to do good things. In his mind, he thinks he's doing. I'm not judging. I'm not saying he's not, but I'm saying like he's doing what he thinks is really good for the world, and he cares. And it's low stakes, low consequence for him because he doesn't have to do any of it. So he's not like I guess in some ways that makes him even more impressive, right? Neptune's also in conjunct Chiron and Venus, which is really interesting. So he likes unusual kind of things. And he's pretty smart. Mercury in Gemini, Jupiter's bounds, but still in the 6th house, very well educated, sure. Jupiter in Scorpio, Ascendant Lord, but it's also retrograde, conjunct the MC, but 12th whole sign house. So really interesting, right? Something hidden, secret rule, but also retrograde. Yeah. He's first in line to be king, right? If King Charles dies. I don't know. I think so. But his concerns are going to be much more against the grain, out of the box. And he seems like I think he seems well-meaning. I don't really know, but it seems that way. Right? So I hope he does well. Yeah. Definitely going to be a bit more rebellious than King Charles, I think. A bit more out of the box. All right. Let's go to Vin Diesel. Neptune retrograde in Scorpio, right on the ascendant. And this is great for acting, right? Really makes him very unique. Very sort of unorthodox kind of actor. Neptune in Scorpio is kind of got like this. If it was a woman, she would be super sexy, right? If it's Vin Diesel, he's not super sexy, at least not to me, but it's kind of got this like mystic quality, badass, but also like translate really well to film because Neptune. And the retrograde quality, you know, like going against everyone, going against the crowd, going against the sun. He dated Michelle Rodriguez. So he had some legal issues for sexual battery, retaliation. Yeah, so he made advances on a woman. Who knows what really happened, but sometimes these women just want money. But it could be that he actually did that. I don't know. Could be either way. But yeah, I don't think there's too much to say about him except it's going to show up in his the kind of roles he plays, and he's done different things. He founded a production company. He also founded a record label, a game developer studio, and he has his voice. And so the thing about that is that retrogrades are like, let's start again, let's start again, let's start again. So it can result in multiplicity, multiple areas of effort or involvement, right? Because it's like, let's go back and do it again. So if you're going to go back and do it again, you might start over and do something different this time. And then you have multiple things that you're doing. All right. Stevie Wonder. Little Stevie Wonder bread. Neptune retrograde. Musical genius, legend, right? I think it's pretty obvious with Stevie Wonder. Don't really need to dig too deep, but he's been a long time Baptist, affiliated with black churches. He was introduced to TM through his marriage to, okay, so like Neptune retrograde, definitely gonna have probably some connection to mysticism. Consistent with spiritual, he became vegetarian, later vegan. He married a bunch of times. He has a bunch of kids. But like generally, it's just going to make him very creative in a very independent way, right? Not influenced by the status quo. Trailblazing, very unique, great for artistry, great for originality, great for creativity. And definitely going to lend itself to mysticism more. So now he's like open to TM, right? Even though he's a traditional Christian. Yeah. All right. Julian Assange. Now this is evident, right, on the surface. Julian Assange definitely not going with the sun, right? Going against the sun, which means going against the crowd, going against status quo, going against society, going against what you're supposed to be doing. Neptune at 0 degrees Sag, Sag ascendant in Jupiter's bounds. Jupiter also ascendant lord retrograde in Scorpio in the 12th. So going into secrets, Scorpio, 12th house, hidden things, psychology, mysteries, right? Also hiding, 12th house, jail as well, unfortunately, prison, institutionalized. That's unfortunate, but yeah. Jupiter's also ruling the fourth whole sign house. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Home and isolation, unfortunately. But yeah, definitely a retrograde kind of person, Julian Assange. Don't really need to say much more about that. I could dig deeper, but I want to get through this. Maya Angelou. My style obviously is in the numbers, not in the depth. Gemini, but it is what it is. Other people can do like 2 or 3 charts and really go in deep. I'm gonna do 48 charts and do them real quick. So Maya Angelou, Neptune retrograde in creative Leo, creative, confident, big, bright, bold, confident Leo, colorful Leo. Yeah, I mean, evident right on the surface. Maya Angelou, definitely a late bloomer, retrograde. Definitely bringing in very original, unique things. Start over, do it again, do it from the top. Let's be original this time. Let's do it better, right? That's kind of retrograde vibe. Neptune, creativity, imagination. Opposite Mars. So bring in Martian qualities to that as well. And she is very raw, very brutal in her approach to her work. And I think that's what makes it very powerful. It's not only Mars, it's Mars conjunct Ceres, also Spirit. I don't know how that translates, but it probably means something. Yeah. And she had a very difficult early go at life, with lots of karmic situations and abuse and different things, and like Sun, Jupiter, square Pluto, and Cancer, 12th whole sign house, definitely a lot of hard situations there. South node Saturn, square Mercury and Venus. But the retrogrades can bring in past issues also. It's also semi-square the moon. But yeah, definitely very like Neptune. See, that's what I was saying with Ariana Grande. You gotta wait till she's much older to really see how the retrograde plays out, because I think the retrogrades are going to be much more powerful as the person ages because of that initial holding back. They just grow in strength in time, and Maya Angelou is certainly a great example of that. Like so much more powerful now that she's more mature as a person. Muhammad Ali. Now, retrogrades having the quality of going against the sun, definitely make a person more stubborn, resistant, resilient. Right? He has Chiron, not too far from the Ascendant retrograde, and Pluto. And I think Pluto is what we're going, this Pluto section. It's pretty far from the Ascendant, but I still think he's like a great example. And we don't really need to pull up his Wikipedia, but why not? There was so much that he was like railing against, fighting against, not to mention his whole career was about fighting. But his whole thing was he changed his name, he changed his religion, he was opposed to the Vietnam War. So very stubborn, very rebellious, very, opposing the sun, which is society. I don't know. There's so much we could. I don't know. Let me see. Let me see later. Religion and beliefs. So Nate, we know. Okay, so he changed his religion. Became part of the. He became Muslim. Changed his name. Slave name. White man's name. Version. I'm not gonna read all that. He did spoken word poetry and rap. read that. Acting, professional wrestling, TV. So yeah, again, one of the things that retrograde can represent is that multiplicity of significations, because it's like, let's start over, let's do it again, let's go back from, hit it from the top. Pluto also square Mars. But yeah, Chiron, Pluto, this is the transformation, right? So it's we're getting a pure form of Pluto when, even though it's in the sign of the sun, it's opposed to the sun, on the other side of the earth of the sun. So a pure Pluto, a Pluto that appears to be against society, but really it's just a pure, more intense version of Pluto. Changed his name, changed his religion, fought people in the boxing ring, fought government in the war ring, not going to war, protesting against war. And these are retrograde too. He's got tons of retrogrades, right? So he's very resilient, very resistant, very defiant, very fighty. All right. Now we go to a different kind of Pluto retrograde with Sharon Stone. Sharon Stone with Basic Instinct, where she's like, showing off her pantyless crotch, right? Pluto, highly sexual, in Virgo. So like Pluto's like destroying Virgo's purity, right? Pluto's like, fuck that, we're not gonna be very pure anymore. We're just gonna be Pluto. Retrograde. Like, and so I remember like reading this in the Wikipedia. They had this movie, Basic Instinct, right? And like nobody would take the role because of the obvious, like the nudity, the content. They're like, oh, that's too risque for me. Along comes Sharon Stone. She's like, perfect, right? Show my beaver to the whole world. Awesome. Like Pluto, right? In Virgo, retrograde, where it's like, okay, yeah. We're gonna destroy that puritanical quality of Virgo with Pluto here at 0 degrees and retrograde, of course. And she's been in other movies where it's like similar, like Pluto, like psychological, sexy. It's very Plutonic, right? It's all that. It's all Pluto. It's strategy, it's psychology, it's mystery, secrecy, sexuality, power control, and retrograde, right? Like, I don't care. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be Pluto, and I'm not gonna, be concerned with what society thinks. I'm gonna do what I need to do. I need to pause for 1 second, guys. I'm back. All right. So yeah, that's Sharon Stone, psychological. Should probably make well, I don't know. I mean, I think Pluto in wait a minute. Why isn't it showing up? Hold on. I didn't share. That's fine. My little picture, that's what. Anyway, it didn't show. Anyway, very psychological, very analytical, strategic, but she plays that in movies, right? But she could probably be that in real life as well. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not going to pull up her Wikipedia just for time's sake, but we can just see in the role sheet that she's so obviously so good at, right? This is I guess you call it femme fatale, like this. Yeah, you guys get it. I don't really need to over-explain it. I hate over-explaining. Probably the Mercury and Taurus. Keep it simple. All right. Steven Seagal. And here's another very obvious one. I mean, most of these are just so painfully obvious. There's a few that just they're not really expressing their retrogrades very well or in a very big or mature way. But it's important to see them as well. Steven Seagal, Pluto and Leo retrograde. I mean, if it's not clear, then let's just understand Steven Seagal for a minute. All right. Allegations and lawsuits. He's been Pluto, right? Retrograde for a man. very sexual, really enhancing the desires, especially in Leo. It's like ego. Oh my God. Right? Hubris. Talk about that. So sexual harassment, if it's one off, it's like, okay, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the woman's just trying to get money. But when it's like again and again and again, something's going on. And I know I personal anecdotal story, which I'll tell you about. Jenny McCarthy said that Seagal asked her to dress undress during an audition on Under Siege 2, 19 employment, sexual harassment, sexual harassment. I mean, come on. Cockfighting. That's funny, cockfighting, because it's almost like what he does is cockfighting, but anyway. More allegations, sexual harassment. And these are not, this is, so you just see here more and more and more. Conflicts with stuntmen. Ronda Rousey. But he was a real life fighter, real life champion fighter. And he's also into Buddhism, which I know it's like you think that's kind of ironic, but hey, these things happen, contradictions, right? Guitarist. He's worked with Stevie Wonder. He's been involved in a line of therapeutic oil products, energy drinks. He's an environmentalist, animal rights activist, and supporter of the 14th Dalai Lama. He's a supporter of Vladimir Putin, which I'm not of the school that everyone's like, oh, Putin's so bad, he's so horrible. I don't think he's good. I don't like him, but I mean he's just one of those things. And he's very into Russia. He was granted Russian citizenship. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, Pluto and Leo. Pluto and Leo just comes with tons of, excuse me. Drink some water. Confidence and potential hubris. Oh, turn the camera off. All right. My bad. All right. Pluto and Leo comes with tons of confidence and hubris. It's also trying the sun in Aries with Jupiter. I mean, so the dude is like beyond confident, just so cocky and confident, right? And he was a real life champion. Mars and Scorpio also retrograde, so very pure Mars and Scorpio. Right? But yeah, it's gonna make him just sort of like not give a fuck. Like he's too confident. He's just gonna do what he wants. My so this woman I knew cooked for him because he was into health food and she was a health food cook. And she also said that he had Asian maids who would I guess service him sexually, and he expected her to. And that's all I'm gonna say. He expected her to. I don't know. I'm not gonna, I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. But yeah, it wasn't a good situation. She got out of there as soon as she could. So that's all real. He does that stuff. Yeah, Pluto retrograde. He just doesn't care. And he's very powerful. He's a very powerful individual, right? And he really will kick your ass. He's fat in real life, but he's also very dangerous, right? He was a real life Aikido, and I'm not sure if he studied other martial arts as well, but he is very dangerous. Like physically, like he really could hurt you. And he's got the confidence to boot. So like, don't fuck with Steven Seagal, I guess. He just doesn't give a shit. He's gonna do whatever he wants. And the answer is to Steven Seagal, and that's it. Okay, here's another one, and it's very interesting. Shannon Doherty. Now, Shannon Doherty has also Pluto, Virgo, retrograde, but notice how it's at the end it's not the anoretic degree, but it's nearly about to move into Libra. And what are the themes of Virgo? Health. Okay. North node in the sixth whole sign house, sixth whole sign house of health and illness. It's not the only thing, TV as well. And she's been in a bunch of TV shows, 90210, Charmed, and I don't know, probably a bunch of other things. But Sun not too far from Chiron. But by the way, which some people will be like, aha, the wounded healer. There's so many instances where the Sun is conjunct Chiron and no wounds, no healing, right? Nothing to do with it. But yeah, there is that. And it's pretty tightly opposite Uranus by 1 degree, retrograde. Uranus retrograde in the first house. But her main thing is that she's sick, right? And that's, unfortunate. But she's been battling cancer. And it's not very good. Let's see here. She was bad girl reputation. Beginning with her time working on Beverly Hills 90210, Doherty gained a reputation in the media for bad behavior, dominated her image for many years. Magazine people called her the iconic Hollywood bad girl of the 90s. Alleging fighting between Doherty and her co-stars dominated tabloid headlines, particularly concerning her heated feud with Jenny Garth. For the reports of heavy partying, on-set lateness, and physical fights. The zine Ben is Dead, which published the newsletter called I Hate Brenda. At the height of the show's popularity, Brenda was her 90210 name, even opened a hotline called the Shannon Snitch Line, to which people could call and report gossip about Doherty. The reputation gained further ground during 3 seasons of Charmed, a feud with co-star Alyssa Milano, which who wouldn't fight with Alyssa Milano? She's horrible. I would fight with Alyssa Milano. But in both instances, Doherty departed the show acrimoniously after a few seasons. She was fired by Aaron Spelling after an ultimatum from Milano. She's difficult to work with. She had habitual lateness. Her lateness was appalling, and she had callous attitude and an indifference. The two of them often wanted to claw each other's eyes out. Escalated into physical violence. Garth said the feud was mutual, based more on immaturity than true animosity. Immaturity, retrograde, right? And the feud is long overdue. Immaturity and Pluto and Uranus, right? Doherty, for her part, admitted to making mistakes, blaming her behavior on the pressure of fame, her youth, problems in her personal life. I have a rep. Did I earn it? Yeah, I did. But after a while, you sort of try to shed that rep because you're kind of a different person. You're evolved, and that all the bad things have done in your life brought you a much better place, right? All right. Political view. She's a registered Republican. See, here's the retrograde thing. I realize that the majority of people in the entertainment business happen to be Democrats. I have no problem with that. She doesn't mind being a disagreeable person to the masses because that's the sun. The sun is the masses. And retrogrades are on the other side of the earth, not concerned with the masses. Therefore, the masses might not like retrograde people, but the retrogrades are going to be the ones to do all the things that need to be done, like all the progress. Right? It's counterintuitive. You think the direct planets are going to be the ones making progress. Actually, the retrogrades make more progress because they're doing things over again. They're restarting from scratch and doing it better, potentially. And then she has this cancer issue, which is really bad. And still she's fighting cancer, and it keeps spreading, and it went to her bones. Spread to her brain and is terminal. She realized the cancer spread to her bones. She was undergoing new cancer treatment and successfully breaking the blood-brain barrier, calling it a miracle. Well, I wish her the best. Certainly do not wish her harm. But that is related to the late degrees of Virgo, right? sort of the karma of Virgo, which is also North Node 6th house, which is TV as well. And Virgo, so could Virgo similarly be related to that? But Virgo, so puritanical, very annoying, very annoyed. Virgo doesn't have enough of your shit, but everyone's had enough of Virgo shit too, so it's mutual. Because Virgo wants things to be a certain standard, right? And anything below that standard, Virgo wants other people to do better and wants itself to do better as well, right? So yeah, Pluto retrograde conjunct the ascendant, especially with also Uranus retrograde in Libra. It's gonna make her difficult. Plus Moon in Scorpio, right? Mars in Capricorn. She's so fierce and fighty. It's squaring the sun. Well, it's past the square, but yeah, I mean, she's got a lot of tough placements. Uranus Chiron opposition, 1st and 7th, right? That's very oppositional. Exalted Sun in Mars's bounds. But anyway, yeah. Saturn's in the 8th quadrant, 6th lord. But that's not so bad. I think it's Mercury actually retrograde. Oh, her ascendant lord Mercury's retrograde. So of course she's disagreeable. And it's in the 8th house, 8th quadrant. And it's in stubborn Taurus. So yeah, very difficult to work with. And it's in conjunct Neptune and Jupiter, which are also retrograde. So yeah, she's what they would call a bitch, right? But a bitch who just doesn't give a shit, and just gonna do whatever she wants. And that's okay, because bitches can get shit done. Yeah, because they're not listening to anyone. They're just doing whatever they want. All right, and that's it. That is all the retrogrades that I got. I was gonna do some Chiron, but the Chiron is a bit more. It's just it's a smaller influence, so it's not going to show up as easily. It's a bit more. It's not as obvious, and some of these aren't even that obvious, right? The obvious ones are obvious. The ones that are not obvious are just the person is not embodying their retrograde energy very well, right? But anyway, guys, most of these were pretty spot on, pretty good, really good demonstrations. Really gives you a good idea of what not only retrograde means, but what it means to have retrogrades on the ascendant or ascendant lord retrograde, right? And once again, these are very personal placements. They're inspiring the person to be more unique, more original, more retrograde, more esoteric, more going against the grain of society, right? Youthfulness, immaturity, slow start, but become more powerful as the person gets older and ages, right? So there's hope for me yet, right? My journey is not over yet, so something to look forward to, in regards to my retrogrades. So yeah, guys, I hope you found it interesting. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. And hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Book a reading with me, macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. Yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Joe Waxman is my name. The astrologer, formerly known as mediocre. And he's okay. All right. Laugh it off, guys. Take a victory laugh. Win before you win. And all that good stuff. I'll see you next time. All right. Thanks. Bye.